Welcome to Relatable Wisdom, where everyday people share the quotes that shaped their perspective, helping us all find a little more clarity in our daily lives. Today I'm joined by Roy Reid, a man many called a living miracle. After surviving a life-threatening heart condition that doctor says should have ended everything, Roy discovered a renewed purpose centered on love, gratitude, and making a genuine difference in people's lives. He's dedicated his work to helping others build stronger relationships through the transformative power of trust. Let's settle in and hear the quote that has become a guiding light for Roy. Tell us your name and what you do.
Well, my name is Roy Reid, and I am an executive coach and trainer. I'm also an author of the book called The Trust Transformation, and do a lot of public speaking as well as work in the community a lot.
Okay, thank you for accepting our invitation. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What's your favorite quote?
So my favorite quote, and I'm going to make sure to read it so I get it right here on the podcast, is nothing gives one person so much advantage over another as to remain always cool and unruffled under all circumstances. And that's from Thomas Jefferson, third president of the United States.
Oh, why do you think this quote resonates deeply with you?
You know, in my career, which I do a lot of communications consulting, I do a lot of crisis communications work. I did a lot of executive and leadership communication during the pandemic. And anytime things get really difficult, it's easy to get caught up and lose your temper, lose your composure, lose your mind sometimes. And it's so important to have somebody in the room that can sit there calmly and cool and in the heat of any situation, whether it's a debate or a crisis or otherwise, and think clearly about what's going to happen and think clearly about what your response is going to be. And when you don't get all worked up about something, it's much easier to make a really informed response or a really good response. It's not going to damage the relationship if you happen to be in a heated argument or something.
Yeah. Nothing gives one so much advantage. When Thomas Jefferson talked about advantage, what was he referring to?
I think it particularly, if you think about during the days that he probably wrote this, there was a lot of debate going on about the early start of our country. There was a lot of challenges in terms of where people were going. There was a lot of feelings in the midst of all of that. And so when you get caught up in debates where people have very strong feelings about something, it's usually the person that remains calm, cool, and collected who takes and gets the advantage in terms of winning the debate or moving their agenda forward or just winning the room, getting people to line up behind you and say, I can get behind somebody like that. That's the kind of person I want to follow.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And then the other part is to be calm, unruffled. Yeah, that's the part it's quite difficult. How do we go about? Because at the heat of the moment, sometimes all the logic, the reason, they fly out the window, and then after the destruction is done, that's when like, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. My wife has she's a licensed mental health counselor, so she talks to people when they're going through very difficult times. She has this this thing on the wall that called the pause. And it says, when things are going well, take pause to appreciate them. When things are going badly, take a pause to think about how you can work on it. And the whole idea is to take that step back and pause for a moment before you respond to anything. And so I think what Jefferson's wisdom in that comment is saying that you want to remain unruffled. And so to take it one step further, I would tell people the best way to do that is rather than to respond immediately to anything, take that pause, take a breath, relax, process, and then make your response. And most times, if you go through that process, you will respond in a much more calm, easy, and unruffled fashion.
Wow, thank you. Would you be so kind to share with us 3 to 5 stories and instances in your life where this quote has kind of been, has played itself out?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say first and foremost, I was very fortunate as a young man at university to work in the student government area, and I was actually the president of the student body president for the university I went to. And at that point, there's an interesting responsibility you have, because there's a pretty large budget that the president has to do, and so there was debates about where to spend the money. There were debates about what we were going to do to on programming, and oftentimes it could get very heated. People had their own interests, they had their own desires, and we see that play out in politics all the time. So early on, the people that I looked to as mentors had this mindset. That's probably where I first picked the quote up. And it really transformed the way I looked at how I was going to advocate for and speak into and really engage people in conversation. And then in the work that I've done over the years, I mentioned before, a lot of crisis communications and a lot of what I'll call high stakes communications. And so I was hired at one point by a large organization that was trying to create a situation where they could develop some property here in Central Florida where I live. And there were a lot of people that didn't want that property developed. And so, as you might imagine, when you go before the county commission and you're debating these issues and people show up and they get heated and mad and like to yell and scream to make their points, oftentimes you need to be that person that steps up to the mic and makes the case in a very rational, reasonable, and calm manner, and really bring the temperature down in the room so the conversation can shift to what is productive. And so oftentimes I found myself in that space where I had to really bring the room down, and so that people could have the conversation they needed to make the right decision in a very rational way.
Ooh. Huh. Okay. Okay. I like the instance of community town hall meeting.
Yeah, they can get pretty riled up sometimes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Sometimes the people, quote unquote, that protest and all those things, when you make an attempt to have a dialogue, they rile up and they start attacking you. And for me,
Yeah.
I'm like, what are we? Isn't the protest to bring awareness to whatever the case might be, so that we can have a dialogue about it, and so that we can change our minds about it, and eventually change our actions, whatever, depending on the context of the protest. And
Yeah.
you are just shouting, fighting, and I'm like, so what are you trying to do?
No doubt, no doubt. And I think too, it's important even in our personal lives. I've been very fortunate to have been married now for 35 years, and
Congrats.
there's many times. Thank you. There's many times where even with the people you love the most, you end up in conversations that can be very difficult. And the fastest way to send a conversation down the wrong path is to yell and get excitable and not listen and not be engaged. And so again, I lean on Jefferson to really take that step back, to take that deep breath, to pause and try to remain unruffled, and be focused on the person and not sacrifice the relationship in the debate. And I think a lot of people, to get that short-term win, they think they've got to do that. They've got to sacrifice the relationship for the debate, and I think that hurts you in the long run.
Let's take a quick pause. If you're enjoying this conversation and want more thought-provoking ideas straight to your inbox, join the Relatable Wisdom email list. It's free, quick, and filled with bite-sized insights, inspiring quotes, and behind-the-scenes reflections from our guests. Just head to relatablewisdom.com/join. That is relatablewisdom.com/join, or tap the link in the show notes. And hey, subscribing to the podcast helps more than you think, and it's free. So if you haven't already, hit that follow button wherever you're listening. All right, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, you've shared us some examples and instances. Has there been a time where, at the very moment, at the very instance, right, it felt like there was no advantage in being calm, in being unruffled? It was better to just shout. It was better to just talk. But then after the occurrence, you look back in retrospect and you're like, I shouldn't have been. There was no need for all that drama.
I've seen more people have to live with the regret of that And a lot of times, even at a professional level, I get hired to come in and fix things when other people have gone that route. And so I've seen it quite a bit. I've lived through it. And we're all human, so we're all going to have that moment where we do make that mistake. We do mistreat somebody in that. We lose our temper. Nobody's immune from that. The objective here is to subscribe to a place where most of the time you can do that. And here's the other benefit is how you show up consistently creates your reputation. And so
Mm,
if you don't have the capacity to control your anger, to control your emotion, and you're that person that's always getting riled up and always pushing people hard, you're going to get a reputation, and people are going to choose to avoid working with you, to avoid having to engage with you. And that nobody wants to be there.
yeah, yeah, that's true. How you show up consistently, is your reputation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mentioned in your questionnaire, I've written a book called The Trust Transformation. And what I spend a lot of my time doing is helping people see how it is they can better build trust, how they can foster trust and cultivate and grow it. And then how do you repair it? And one of the quickest ways to lose it is when you lose your temper, when you're abusive in the way that you're engaging with somebody, when you seem out of control. People are less likely to trust you if they don't feel you are in control of the emotion, if you're not in control with how you're reacting to things. And so again, the trust is the currency that we're given by others to have the conversations that need to be had, to talk about the things that need to be talked about, and to advance the things that are important to us. And so I think part of Jefferson's quote is a major contributing factor to how people can build trust.
Yeah, I like the fact when you said people, you talk about transformation. You said people can lose it, and one of those things is the temper. Can you just quickly run down how, for those that have lost the trust, how they can redeem or repair it?
Absolutely. The first thing that we've got to do when we want to repair trust is we have to be very sincere in our apology or working toward the forgiveness that people can give us and give us that license to come back and earn the opportunity again. So you've got to be intentional. You've got to make that apology. You've got to offer whatever it is that you can help do to make things right in the situation, and you've got to live up to it and keep the promise that whatever that promise that you've made to make things right, you've got to follow through on it. People are watching, and one of the things that we teach people is, trust is based on both emotion and experience. And so the hurt needs to be taken care of. That's part of the emotional part of it. But then the consistency to deliver on the things that you promise is that experience that's going to allow them to say, okay, I can trust you again.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed is that people feel that with trust, that is enough to just, be sincere, to just apologize and say, oh yeah, I did insult you yesterday. I almost pushed you down the stairway, and I'm sorry, my temper got a hold of me, and I'm sincere about it, right? And for me, that's not enough. In fact, that's like a prerequisite. It's not even. It's like it's what gets you into the conversation in the first place. I don't think that's enough, and most people think it's enough, but it's not.
No, you've got to be you can't just say I'm sorry. You can't just say I didn't mean to do that. Again, you have to be genuinely committed to that, and then you have to change the way you behave. I mean, if you say I'm sorry today and show up tomorrow and are the same abusive person that you were, they're just going to write you off and say they're just trying to fool me to get me to believe them again, but they're going to still treat me the same way they did before. So we have to
Yeah,
change the way we behave. We have to make that effort and live up to that standard that we promise when we do make that sincere apology.
yeah. I think the attempt is looking at the situation and not just saying, "Oh yeah, I made a mistake." It should be, "Okay, I made a mistake. Yeah, we do make mistakes. What can I do to prevent this mistake from happening again?"
That's right. That's right. And then demonstrate how, and follow up and communicate. People, if we are consistent in how we communicate, we're managing the expectations. And even then, if we make another mistake, as long as we're communicating and giving them the best that we can, we'll earn the opportunity to come back again and again.
Yeah, when you say communicating, what do you mean with that?
So one of the things that I teach people is a set of guiding principles for how you continue to build trust day in and day out. One of those guiding principles is to keep your promises and communicate consistently. So an example of that would be you and I are in a business relationship, and I make a commitment to you to deliver a product by a certain day. And over the course of the time between the day I make the promise and the day I'm supposed to deliver, I'm telling you what's happening along the way. And so I would say, oh, the product is completed, it's made, it's now going to shipping, it's now on the way, it's now coming here. But then here something happens. The truck crashes and the delivery doesn't come in, or it's delayed and it's not going to be there. If I communicate with you at every step and I've kept you informed of what's going to happen, even if I miss that delivery date, you're gonna give me a second chance likely, because I didn't just show up the last day and say, oh, it's not coming.
Yeah.
And so managing expectations is about consistently communicating. And maybe a bigger principle in this is that a lot of times when people get into business relationships, they're willing to sacrifice the relationship to get the business, or they're willing to take shortcuts to get something and then take the money and run. And you've got to be as focused on the relationship as you are on the transaction. And so communicating consistently shows the other person that you care, that you're engaged, and that they matter.
Well, I like that. I love that example you gave about the business relationship, the product, and all that. For me, would you be so kind to just add in a personal example, right? Or something other than a business, something that's a day-to-day activity with the regular lives, because not everybody is doing business.
Yeah, sure. I do a lot of work that requires um, it some of the things that I do for people are in the public area with, say, the media, television or radio, or
Yeah.
the news, and a lot of things can go into delivering on that promise that I'm going to get something out there, that I'm going to deliver that, and a lot of it's outside of my control. And I don't have any control. Once I've delivered that information, then it's up to the media to do or not do with it. And so there's been times where I've done all of the things I can do to deliver something, and then a story doesn't happen the way we want it to. And so I've got to communicate to the people that I work for how that process works. I've got to communicate to them what all the possible outcomes that are going to happen, and then I've got to give them the information they need, that if it doesn't go the way that we hope it does, how can they respond differently in that space? And a lot of people, they miss that opportunity, and they make the promise, they don't deliver, and then people don't believe them when they come back to say, this is how I think we should go next. And so a lot of the work that I do has some of those intangibles that I have to contend with. And I've got to manage that on behalf of my clients to make sure they understand how the process works and that they're clear on what all the potential outcomes are going to be. If I don't communicate that, then they're going to be both disappointed, and they're not going to believe me when it doesn't work out the way they hoped it did.
Yeah, I'm glad when you gave the second example, it just occurred to me that, yeah, this thing he's talking about, I experience this daily. You booked the time for this podcast meeting, right? And let's say for some reason I did ask you, I sent you some reminder messages that, oh, your meeting is so number of days. I'm excited to chat with you and all that. But let's say I had a cold or stuff like that that affected my voice, where I'm not able to to really have a conversation with you. And I message you and I'm like, Roy, I'm so sorry I came down with a high fever, and I would not be able to show up for the meeting. Please, when you just use this link to reschedule, and we can make a better date. Hopefully by then I'll be well recovered. Now I've changed the expectations. The expectation you had before was, oh, I'm going to show up this time of the day and we're going to
Right.
record a meeting and that. But now the expectation is, oh, so he's down with fever. Okay, he should when he recovers, we'll set up a time, right? Rather than you hop on the studio and you're like, where's this guy? He's not there. And I'm like, later on, and I'm like, oh, well, I felt ill, and of course I felt ill. What do you want me to do? And usually that's what most people do. But now you're disappointed because you had an expectation, yeah, and so
Right.
the expectations was not achieved, and so you're disappointed. But if your expectation was yeah, because I realigned it that no, there will be no meeting today, and so when the time that was slotted for the meeting comes up, you're like, oh yeah, I was supposed to have this meeting, but the guy is not feeling too well, so yeah, so there's no disappointment and you move on with your day. Yeah, yeah, I understand
Right.
that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'll give you a good example in this space. I going through this podcasting experience, you meet a whole lot of people in the process of being matched up and all of that. And just a couple weeks ago, I had interviewed with a lady about her program. We set the date for it, and the day came and I never got any information on it. I'd blocked that time off my calendar. I had made arrangements to be in the right place at the right time, and then
Yeah.
I never got the information for it. So if she were to call me back, I don't know that I would do that show, right?
Uh, yeah, yeah,
And it would have been a great show.
yeah. It
So
would have been, but yeah, the
yes,
expectations were not managed, and now people are left disappointed.
that's right. That's right. So we've got to remember that trust is and what I tell people is not don't think about it as just a fragile emotion. You have the opportunity to really contribute to what it does, and it becomes your operating system if you really understand all the pieces and how it works. And so these are just a couple of the components of that. And you really change your life when you become intentional about building trust.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And for me, when you said keep your promises, manage expectations, what I'm thinking in my head is do what you say you will do,
Yes.
and say what you've done. Yeah, right.
That's it, man. And do that enough over time, and you build a great reputation, and people want to do work with you, and they want to hang out with you, and they want to be part of your crew.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roy. It's been an absolute delight chatting with you. Where can my listeners learn more about you and what you do?
Absolutely. RoyWReid.com is my website. I have a
Can you
community
can
on,
you can you spell it out? Just
yeah,
yeah.
RoyWReid.com. RoyWReid.com is probably the best way to find me at the website.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing with us your favorite quote and just breaking it down for me and my listeners.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Relatable Wisdom, and I've been your host, Wisdom Okonkwo. You've been listening to the podcast where every story, quote, and insight helps you see life a little differently. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow the show on your favorite podcast app and share it with someone who would love the conversation. For more inspiring voices and timeless wisdom, visit relatablewisdom.com. Until next time, keep living, learning, and collecting wisdom that matters most to you.